there been an ingredient that you weren't able to master?
A sign of weakness. Well, what a good question. It's a very good question. Is there anything difficult to master? Difficult or lack of interest could be the same interpretation. I've lack of interest in too much molecular gastronomy. I've not tried to master it. I will use it to the extent of sense and sensibility without the chemical intervention. Presentation, vitally. So food and fashion go hand in hand, but there's no reason why you can't take an ancient recipe. You look how that was presented, awful. And for today's standard, now you take that and I call it decompose or decompile. You take the element, break it down into all those different elements, and then start to put it back together again with a new presentation. So, do I not master something? Yes, it is molecular gastronomy. And if I do something for a modern presentation, which may have been stimulated from molecular gastronomy, it is using natural methods in order to attain it and achieve it.
Next. Is there a food that you hate?
Oops.
Yes. all foods which have been overly mass produced, processed, should I say, cheapened, and produced on the grounds of cost factors alone. Whether it's cost factors make it cheaper or make more money for the producer. I do not like poor food. Simple, fresh. It can be simple as anything, as long as it's fresh and it's grown with love, it's produced with care, and it's there for the right reasons. So I do get very annoyed and upset when I go to places and I can taste it, I can smell it, I can smell all the chemicals, the additions in order to cheapen products down, and I really dislike that. And I know there's always that difficulty where people might be listening to this or watching me, or when I'm saying it or reading it, whichever way, and think, yeah, it's all right for him, he can afford it, he's rich, he's on television. That's not true, that's not the case. You know, I have to work hard in order to survive, but I prefer to choose not to eat rubbish and to save my money and buy something which is good, buy smaller quantities, eat less of it, but enjoy something which is of quality, and that is my choice. But when you actually look at the global issues that we have, Mexico as bad as, America as bad as, Britain as bad as, you know, I've just mentioned 3 countries which probably have the worst levels of obesity, and have the highest rates of illness and issues related to possibly bad diet, over-processed foods, over-consumption of ingredients. What can you do about that? Stop eating it. It's very simple. And just focus on just say let's cut down. Let's just go focus on quality, on some good quality products. Let's get producers to actually produce with love, with care, with attention, so that it won't put us in an early grave, that won't put us into hospital, that won't put us on tablets for the rest of our lives. It's not rocket science to actually just break down what's the problem. We are the problem. We ourselves are our problem. Just stand back, look at it, stop it. Just look, and then start to break down what you want to eat, the fuel for our body.
Yes.
What are we pumping into ourselves? And when you break down that plate of food that is cheap, that is easily, quickly made, which is mass produced, what's in there? How many chemicals? Let's just set aside. What's the fresh food? What's going into our body? If we looked at a car, and people I know across a lot of parts of the world love their cars, whether it's a motorboat, whether it's a beautiful home, and whether it's a sports car, a Rolls Royce, a Jaguar, whatever it may be, pride and joy. Now then, if you took your pride and joy and you said, right, what should I put in my car today? Oh, diesel, electric, petrol, who cares? Well, actually the car will care, and you won't get very far. The fuel is what will pump the heart of that vehicle. What do we do ourselves? Look at ourselves and think, oh, what should I pump in myself today in order to make me go from A to B? Anything, who cares? And that is the problem. We will focus on what works, what makes a vehicle work, but we don't focus on what makes us work. And we've got to just stand back and think, look at ourselves as motors, as engines. And if we do that, then we'll start to think about what fuel we put into our bodies. I'm starting to get all ranty now, aren't I?
No. It's very good.
No, it's okay.
Sobin said that What's your favorite ingredient to cook with?
Anything which is quality fresh, I get excited. I don't know, the older I've got, I find it more difficult to plan menus in advance, because I much prefer to come and say, right, any ingredients, look around, see what we've got, then I'll get excited. If I go to the sea, I've got to have something out of the sea, I've got to have it fresh out of the sea. So any ingredient which is fresh, which will stimulate me, walk around a market, you see local regional produce and producers, that's what gets me excited. That's where I'll take things and start to build things together, and then I'll go back and do the menu. I love doing that. I love doing it. But when I see food which is no inspiration at all, I might as well go to bed.
Now, being a food archaeologist, I think this is one of my favorite questions. If you had a time machine, what would be your first stop in culinary history?
I've gone back myself in my head. Oh, there's so many times.
Where would you go?
I would go back to the Roman period, probably calling up the ancient Greeks on the way, pop over to the ancient Egyptians, just in particular periods of time. But the Romans, I know it's sort of, the Roman period spans 300, 400 years, so you know it is difficult. And when we stand back now, we sort of harness these 400 years and condense it. But when you look at what the Romans actually did, certainly for Europe, in terms of their food product, their movement of ingredients across Europe in order to grow and take to Britain and take to Greece, they were the first people to, well, the ancient Greeks were the first people to export food products. And when you start to look at what they did and how they produced it and why they produced it, that is where I'd love to go back and to actually see, to sense, to smell, to taste some of the things which I'm replicating, which I'm trying to understand, and just to actually taste the real, the original, and why they were doing all these things. Look at the shopping lists of the Romans, where they were sending out for all kinds of wonderful things from different parts of the world, the cinnamon, the spices from the Malabar coast that they were bringing, expensive amounts of very expensive products. But I've also got my own theories when it comes to why a lot of Romans died during the, they died of lead poisoning. And there's two ways of actually looking at it. They always said that the Romans used to show off about the food and the huge big tables of food, but they'd also show off about the spices that they would use, because spices were terribly expensive. The more spices they had, the more they thought they were wealthy. However, my theory is that's not particularly the case. My theory is the fact that most Romans died of lead poisoning because of the water supply. Very clever, you know, to have this channels of water supply back then, but the lead from the pipes was giving them lead poisoning. Now, part of the first signs of lead poisoning and illness, you lose your palate. So if you're wealthy and now all of a sudden you're eating food and you can't taste anything, you don't blame the water because you don't